Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Apple as a Catalyst for Change to Proficiency as part of our LTI webinar series. Of course, today I will be introducing someone who has become a good friend of mine, Christy Gilliland, who's down in Williamson County, which is in Franklin, Tennessee. I will go ahead and go over a few ground rules, and then I will go ahead and pass the baton over to her. First and foremost, on the right side of your screen, you will see a little hand. If at any point throughout the webinar you have a question or if you have something about which you would like to chime in, please go ahead and click that little hand, and we will see that on our end, and we will go ahead and at an appropriate stopping point, we will go ahead and open up the floor to you. Also, if you have a question that you would prefer to go ahead and type out, you can do that by clicking the questions tab over there on the right, a little bit below where you would click that little hand. Just as a quick introduction, again, my name is Andrew Bowen, and I am the Academic Market Specialist at LTI. LTI, of course, is the exclusive provider of all AAPPL assessments. We are extremely proud to offer what is called the AAPPL, and this is a K through 12 focused proficiency assessment. It covers all 4 skills, of course, looking at speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and more than amply, being that it is an AAPPL product, does cover all 3 modes of communication. So looking at presentational, interpersonal, and interpretive. My personal favorite, of course, is the interpersonal, which is a simulated live chat. I'm sure Christy will be covering that, in which students are actually able to show how they can communicate in a conversational situation. One of the many perks to this assessment is, as I'm sure many of you have heard, can earn students the seal of biliteracy. This turns the AAPPL into what is essentially a summative assessment. It shows exactly at which level of proficiency students are on the AAPPL proficiency scale, which is a wonderful tool. It is an actual seal that goes on their diploma as they graduate. They also, new this year, receive an AAPPL language proficiency certificate, which shows across all 4 skills exactly where they fall on the proficiency scale. What we will be discussing, however, today is something that really gets my juices flowing as a former language instructor myself, and that is the formative assessment that is the AAPPL. Those of you who have used the AAPPL have seen that not only is there a score report that shows exactly where the students are on the proficiency scale, but it also shows there's a strategy column for every single student. It says, based on the AAPPL can-do statements, the student can do this, has demonstrated that he or she can do that, but also what can we do as educators to ensure that we are moving the students up the continuum next time they take the assessment. So something that Christy has uncovered in her wonderful world language program is the use of the AAPPL as a catalyst to launch world language programs away from that grammar drilling and towards teaching to proficiency. If we set our goals as proficiency goals and have a tangible way of showing that we are either accomplishing those or we have some work to do to accomplish those proficiency goals, then this concept can work wonders for our students, for our instructors, and for the program as a whole. Without further ado, Christy Gilliland, please take the floor.
Thank you, Andrew. So that was really nice. I appreciate all your nice words. And kudos to all of you in the audience for joining us, because it's a late Friday afternoon. God bless you for coming and sitting down with us, because I know Fridays are hard. So what I invite you to do is, as I go through this, please, I encourage you to ask me questions, raise that hand, type a question into the question box, because what I would really like to do is make sure the information is timely. And what I know about educational folks like myself is that we are the worst about acronyms and terminology, and there's an assumption sometimes on our part. So I invite you to ask for clarification for that. So I'll be happy to do that. So just want to give you a quick who am I, and so I am the World Language Curriculum Specialist for our school district, and I was the first person in the position 7 years ago. I've been here 7 years, I can't believe it. But fortunately got to kind of write my role. And so that's been, you know, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, but I have really, really enjoyed being able to take our district on a new journey, and we'll get to that throughout the presentation. Um, Another role of mine is representing the National Association of District Supervisors for Foreign Language, which is in partnership with AAPPL, and I serve as the treasurer for that organization. And my latest endeavor is working with AAPPL's Leadership Initiative for Language Learning. It's also called LIL. Um, I was part of the first cohort in 2015 at Ohio State University, so it's fun to get to now be a leader, as a co-leader, as part of the third cohort for the LIL. So that's fun, and they're all coming to Nashville. They're coming to see us in our district. So we'll have about 50 emerging leaders from all over the country for different organizations coming together to learn about leadership this summer. So that's kind of my world and where I'm living. Tell you a little bit about our district. I know many of you have different roles that you play in your district. So I kind of want to give you background about our district so you can kind of see, you know, size and for instance, brings different factors and challenges and benefits. So we're about 40,000 students, K through 12. We are located just south of Nashville. We are a suburb of Nashville. And we are actually, not to brag, but we are the highest performing district in the state. And that comes into play for my storyline in just a minute. But I service about 100 world language teachers, and our elementary program is actually outside the school day. Um, and then there's about 85 middle and high school traditional, so to speak, world language teachers. All that I'm telling you about today could not have been accomplished without a core group of a leadership team from the curriculum writers. And they actually, their title grew beyond curriculum writers because they were and still are, continue to be leaders in their building for helping teachers understand the shift to proficiency. So just to give you an idea, so I want to give you a little bit of history about where we started. Um, and for us, we really started looking at the common educational speak, if you will, of the push towards common assessments. We knew for world language from trial and error that our answer for common assessment was not multiple choice, fill in the blank assessments. So we really started digging into what would a common performance assessment look like. And um, we, with mixed success, right? So I hope you'll find that you can ask me questions because I will be very honest with you about our journey. So what we decided early on is we knew we needed to measure our program, where it was, and then set goals about where we wanted to be. And one of the ways that we decided to do that was to give the apple to some of our students. And, you know, we didn't want to come down, me being at the district central office level, I really didn't want to come down first as a mandate. We're going to give this and everybody's going to take it. So we did have a little pool of money that I asked for, and I just asked for teacher volunteers. Hey, teachers out there, I've got a little pot of money. Who's interested in giving the apple? And so we had some brave souls who just said, yeah, I want to see what my kids can do. And I really appreciated that. So we had about 900 students across the district. So a population of maybe about probably 15% of our students took it, just a good indicator. But so we gave that across levels, across languages, and we offer Chinese, French, German, Latin, and Spanish here in our district. So we got a cross section of all of those. And so our level 1 students across the languages scored a novice high. Very respectable, right? So we were like, okay. Well, we looked at level 2, again, across the languages, novice high. And, okay. So then we looked at the level 3 data. And guess what? It was a novice high, barely above a novice high, like not even quite an intermediate low. And so we just kind of went, okay, so all right. So we really started asking some tough questions. Here in the state of Tennessee, we have a 2-year language requirement. You have to take 2 years of the same language, and I realize not all states have that, and we do count it as a blessing here. But what we found is we had a high drop-off level of students who went from level 2 to 3, and we had 6% of our kids that went on to take AP courses. 6% in a high performing district. So we started to do some really soul searching, and maybe could our drop off numbers be because after 3 years, our students couldn't do much more than they could after year one? So it, it really took some, tough questioning and answers. So digging into those answers. So that was, I will tell you, what gave us the impetus to really go, okay, well, this isn't working. What do we do? Because I will say we were taking, let's call them other national assessments, um, and we were knocking it out of the park on those grammar fill in the blank kind of things. But what we found is that when our teachers were taking kids out of the country, they couldn't speak and they'd freeze up and freak out. So something had to change. So the apple for us was the reason to go, okay, we have been measured and we've been found wanting. So what we decided to do is, okay, we knew we weren't pedagogically ready to sit down and rewrite curriculum, to be honest, as a district and myself. We needed to do some learning first. So in the meantime, what we found was a way for us was to say, okay, we've got this textbook driven curriculum. What can we do to start making a turn towards proficiency? Well, if we knew that Apple was about performance assessment, performance towards proficiency, how can we start implementing that before we do a curriculum overhaul? So for better or for worse, we looked out across the country and we found other organizations and districts that had performance assessments already. Shelby County Schools in Tennessee, Jefferson County in Kentucky, and FLING, the Foreign Language Educators New Jersey. They have some really good PALs, I think, around the DC area. So we found some of those and we kind of took the topics and we patched them to our textbook curriculum. I know it's not ideal, but it's the only way we could try to get our brains around what a performance assessment was, thinking, okay, this is going to be our end goal. How do we get back to that? So what we discovered in the process was we didn't know how to assess performance. And so we started digging in and offering PD, professional development, around performance assessments. So if we knew the end goal was the apple, so knew we needed to do performance assessments like the apple throughout the course of the year. So yes, we were still under a textbook driven curriculum, but this kind of let us live a little bit in trying to get our minds in the mindset of teaching for proficiency. So then we also committed to doing several book studies, and then we committed to hiring Thomas Sauer, who is a language consultant and who works also very closely with AAPPL as well in many projects. So we knew we had to get the right environment around us and do some just digging in for almost 2 years of just learning about performance assessments and growing in what they were and looked like in our classrooms. So I just want to share with you that the apple helped us move into an arena of talking about proficiency. And then what we discovered once we started putting those performance assessments in with our textbook, we realized this isn't going to cut it. We need a curriculum overhaul. So we did. And that took a long time. So we're just going to kind of go through just for a second, just to briefly highlight how we did some things. Now, this is our timeline, so it doesn't have to be yours, but so we started really, and honestly before this, even 2014, we started digging into professional development and offering what it means to conduct a performance assessment? How do you grade a performance assessment? How do you score it? Gosh, what do the kids do? And one kid's giving an assessment with the teacher, and what are the other kids doing? Just trying to get our brain around what that looks like in the classroom. And so in the summer of 2016, I got that curriculum team together and we wrote new curriculum. And in that curriculum, we knew if we were working towards the apple at the end of the year, again, we need to put those performance-like tasks throughout the curriculum. I'm going to show you all a sample in just a second. But I don't know about you and your district, but in the past, whenever a content area is tasked with writing new curriculum, it sometimes goes like this. All right, teachers, we're going to pay you to come for a week, and we want you to rewrite all of your world language curriculum. We want you to do it for all levels, all languages. You have a week, ready, go. And I'm not the biggest fan of that model, so I'm very excited to report that I went to my bosses with that, and I just got permission to start with one level at a time. And I will say, I think that's been one of our critical pieces to success is that we didn't rewrite everything all at once and then try to implement it all at once. But because we were deciding to go textbook free also, that gave us some more flexibility. Made our job a little harder, I'm not going to lie, but it also gave us some flexibility. So what we were able to do and what we continue to do is we pilot the level of curriculum for 1 year, and then we implement it district-wide the following year. So that allows us a full year, summer to write it, and then a whole year to tweak it and gather our resources. So you can kind of see the timeline and where we are now. This year, 2018-19, is we are piloting level 3 currently, and we have implemented level 2 this year. So next year will be the next level in that. So I will say that for us, we found one of the ways to simplify it is all of our languages share the same curriculum. It's the exact same for all our modern languages. I'll be honest, we haven't figured out how to tackle Latin yet. Just putting that out there. So for Chinese, French, German, and Spanish, we all share the same curriculum. So we all have the same performance assessments, learning targets, daily learning targets, but of course we bring our own resources to it. So again, I'll show you that in just a second. But I just really want to emphasize that this is not gospel, our path. Our path is not your path. You're going to pick maybe something from today or something that's been, it's brewing in the back of your mind. For us, it was the apple that was the catalyst to change. So maybe that's where you find yourself as well. And for us, it led to new curriculum. You might not be in a position. You may be a teacher in a classroom who has no control over that. But what I encourage you to do is maybe you can ask your PTOs, parent-teacher associations, love to give money for measuring, for assessment. They really, little mini grants and things like that. Some schools have used their class fees to maybe only you do one part of the apple, maybe you do the writing piece. So I just encourage you to be creative with ways that you create your path. And I'm just giving you, this is what we did. Please don't take it as gospel, and I invite you to find a better way and tell me for those that come after. Um, so I just wanted to share this with you as before we jump in, because how many of you are sitting out there going, oh, I need so and so to be hearing this message. I really need them to be convinced. You don't have to raise your hand, but I know you're out there. So I just want to encourage you to ponder this question, because this is the question I usually get. I'm bought in, but how do I get my boss or my principal or my so-and-so bought in? So I do have an answer. You just might not like it. So how do I help my colleagues move? And I love this graphic because if you're on this webinar, you're searching and you're looking for ways to transition to proficiency, and we're the person in the back. And I caution you not to be the person in the back of this picture pushing your colleagues over the cliff, because clearly that person in the front does not want to go. So if we can't coerce or threaten or do something in a negative way. So there has to be a positive way that we can pull in our colleagues or our principals or, you know, your leadership, I just have a suggestion for you. You won't convince them, your students will. And here's what I mean by that. I have a school who was very much, a high school, very much against the move towards proficiency from the start. And one of the teachers there just really got honestly curious when we started that professional development those many years ago. And I could see the spark in her, the willingness to just think a little bit differently about her practice. And so I invited her to be on our writing team. And what I can tell you is that um, she started what Thomas Sauer calls professional jealousy, in that her students, her colleagues around her started noticing how she interacted even in the hallways with her students, and the kids would talk back. I don't know about you, but how many times have you tried to talk to a kid and they just, or they just zoom past you because they don't want to interact because they're just freaked out? But the colleagues around her started noticing how her kids are comfortable interacting with her, and they knew something was up in her classroom. And so teachers started to want to come into her classroom while she was teaching to see what on earth she was doing in this move to proficiency. They knew she was on the writing team. They knew she was going through some learning on her own and with us as a group. And so her students performing um, and being comfortable speaking the language and using the language are what convinced her colleagues. She didn't have to do a whole lot of coercion, to be honest. And we have found that to be the best model for convincing colleagues. So if you can just let go the responsibility of convincing your colleagues, but really inviting them in to watch your students, and by concentrating on the student aspect and what your students can do, it takes the threat away of me as a teacher having to change. Okay, it's my students. And then, yeah, of course, if your students are going to have to change, the practices that get them there have to change, but it takes the threat of, imagine a teacher, and many of you might be in this boat. You're, in the classroom 20 or 30 years, and all of a sudden you're asking me to do something different. That's scary. And we understood that from the get-go. So we've tried to go a little grassroots and convince. Now, I will tell you, we're at the point where we're kind of like, okay, it's giddy up time. But we have found that to be the model that works most effectively. So, and I think I'll take a pause after this maybe for questions, but I just want to point out what our mission is we call ourselves proficiency focused, but performance based for our curriculum. And like I said, I'll go in just a little bit of detail with that for you, those that want to know. But our courses have proficiency goals, but yet what we know is that what happens in the classroom is performance. So for those of you that are wondering, okay, what's the difference? The terms are not interchangeable, proficiency and performance. Notice that the AAPPL is ACTFL's assessment of performance towards proficiency in languages. We love our acronyms. Um, so, but proficiency is, and you measure it, that's the OPI, oral proficiency interview. That's when you take a student and you plop them into an immersion language setting. Go kid, how do you do? Versus what happens in the classroom is performance, because performance is always practiced, it's known, it's nothing new. So when we measure performance, kids have had time to practice and prepare and build up to that performance assessment. Whereas proficiency, there's no prep time, you don't know what's coming at you. So for us, the way we've come to wrap our brains around the AAPPL in our district is we have a curriculum and we have our topics. And of course, Apple releases their topics for the AAPPL. And some of the topics align to our curriculum and some don't. We are never going to rearrange our curriculum to fit the AAPPL. We're just not. But what we've decided to kind of take the AAPPL measure as the things that are known in our curriculum and that we're practiced, those are being assessed. That's a performance assessment. But any context that is new that our kids have not practiced, we're viewing that as a proficiency assessment, meaning how can you take, or students, can you take what is comfortable, what language bits have you acquired, and how can you apply those to a new setting? So that's proficiency. So the test is kind of, in our minds, a pseudo of performance and proficiency in that case. Now, I will tell you, we have some teachers who freak out like they do in all content areas. Oh, we haven't covered that topic. And, you know, they try to get through that topic, if you will. It's not encouraged by me, but I think there are some natural ways that you can bring those topics in if you want. Bell ringers, just looking for those natural fits into our curriculum. So we don't worry about matching up with the Apple topics. We rock on with our curriculum and then want to see how kids can apply that language to new circumstances. So Andrew, is now a good time to kind of pause and take some questions?
It sure is. So I see that we have one hand raised. It looks like Martina Nieto. I will go ahead and unmute you, Martina, so you can go ahead and fire away. Can you hear us, Martina?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Ah, yes, if you speak up a little bit.
So I was trying to clarify, like you were saying that you can get bits and pieces of the, or can you hear me?
Barely, you're very soft.
Yes. Let me see if I can fix it. Oh, I can't hear you now. Maybe I'll have my question for later on if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem. We'll come back
Perfect.
to you. You can certainly type it in the chat box if you want to, and we'll definitely have time for questions at the end of this.
Okay, that's
Anybody
perfect.
else?
Looks like we're all set for now.
Okay, I don't mind wait time.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll wait a few seconds, see if anybody else chimes in. If not, we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, don't hesitate to type out a question because I know if you're like me, you're afraid you're going to lose it while you're listening to me talk. So absolutely welcome to do that as well. So I just wanted to share with you our picture, just a snapshot, if you will, of our curriculum. I hope you can see it on the screen there. I just want to go ahead and kind of stress to you the importance of that backward design model. So what we have chosen to do is go with essential themes or questions that are big and unanswerable with simple language. So we're from the get-go, what you're looking at is a level 1 final quarter kind of picture of our curriculum. And so the big question of how am I part of a community gets answered in, I'm trying to see if you can use my, can you see my cursor if I move it on the screen? I can't tell, Andrew.
Yes, can see
Okay.
that.
Okay, so this essential question here, how am I part of a community, gets answered in 3 parts, 2 or 3 parts. So that gets answered as I can make recommendations for places to visit and things to do in my community. So this gets answered, this answers our essential question, and then so how do we know that kids can do this? And the I is missing there, it's just covered by the band. I can make, that would be the I can, the student. So these are written in student-friendly language. So how do we know that a kid can do this, which tells us the kid can meet the essential question? So they're going to do this, so these kind of go towards each other, if I had some arrows here. So this performance assessment, if the kids can do this performance assessment, then we know as an instructor that students have met this I can statement. And so what we knew, again, going back to the Apple, if kids are going to be assessed on the Apple at the end of the course, then gosh, we've got to do Apple-like assessments all along the way. So we call those performance assessments here, and this is just a sample of it. I will share with you that we have made all of our curriculum as we roll it out public. We truly believe in sharing our hard work and in the hopes that you will take this as a teacher or in your district and take it and actually make it better. So you'll make the 2.0 version and then we're hoping you'll share it back with us for ways that you improve it. So I want to show you this the backward design nature. So we go from big, which is not even on the page itself, which Apple would be big, and then we go down to our theme, and then we get down to our performance indicator and assessment. But you know, what we discovered is that many curriculums that we used as models and we're looking at around the country stopped here at the performance assessment level. And a teacher reads that and knows, okay, I've got 2 or 3 weeks to get my kids here, but what do I do tomorrow? what do I do with my kids? So we knew that we had to break that down into smaller pieces for daily learning targets. So for example, where does a teacher start? Um, so the day one, we say that a learning target is about a day, you know, or so. So the goal for this day for learning target 1 is for students to say, I can identify popular places in a community. That's it. It's interpretive. We're going to talk about the modes in a second. So that interpretive, the Apple assesses interpretive listening and interpretive reading. So guess what kind of tasks the teachers are going to do all day that day? All interpretive tasks. And what we decided, okay, so how does a teacher know that their students can do this learning target? Well, we provide a formative check for learning. I mean, basically, it's the last activity. What's a check for learning? An activity. What's an activity? A check for learning. Because if you're not checking for learning, why are you doing it in the classroom? So it really had us cut the fat, if you will. Oh, but I always love that menu unit. When are the kids ever going to have to make a menu in real life? So it allowed us to honestly let go of some of those practices that really just did not move the kids up the proficiency scale. So this check for learning is basically the last activity. So what a teacher, their job now is to, okay, back map the lesson plan. Okay, how do I get the kids, if this is what I want them to do at the end of class, what do I do to get them ready to be able to do this last check for learning? So you kind of change the way you structure your lessons, and that everything is about accomplishing the learning target. And so the promise is that if you, student, go through all these checks for learning and are able to do those, then guess what? After 2 or 3 weeks, don't sweat it, you're going to be able to do this performance assessment. The other piece on here that I didn't touch on were the language chunks. One of the things you see here, you're going to see student generated in our curriculum a lot. And what that means is we have moved away from traditional teacher created vocabulary lists. It is strange for me as a, 20-year teacher, years old, to tell a kid, here are the 10 things that you can talk about. I am not their age. I don't know what's important to them. So what we decided is, hey, you know what? Let's ask the kids what they want to talk about. If I talked about popular places in the community, I don't know what those are for teenagers. I'm not 14 years old. So the vocabulary they share with me that they want to learn probably is going to be different than what the list I create. Now, might there be some same things? Yeah. But it's really taking the teacher off the stage, on the stage platform, and really making them a facilitator to language. Hey kids, tell me what you want to learn. So we're learning alongside with the kids. In particular, when we take this learning target and then we apply it to a popular place in a community in another country, in the target language country, we may not know where kids hang out in Madrid, but gosh, I'm going to get to find that out while I bring these resources to my kids. So it really puts us on the side and putting the students back on the stage of learning. And to be honest, the responsibility of learning really falls on the student shoulders rather than the teachers. So that has been a shift for us, and a positive one. And as you can imagine, when students, what we're finding is when students are able to contribute and inform and tell the teachers what they want to learn about, there's a little bit higher motivation. So those are all bits that we've kind of discovered along the way, but this is just a snapshot, and it's not meant to sell our curriculum. Like I said, it's free. You can take it and use it, and I can show you where that's located at the end if you like. But I can share that link with you. But anyway, so just wanted to give you an idea of where this idea of an assessment overhauled our curriculum. So one of the things that research told us when we started digging into this was, I wanted you to see these back here. See these learning targets, how they're called interpretive, and this next one is interpretive. We decided that we were going to follow an input or interpretive to output model, presentational, interpersonal. So, but what research told us was that any level, but especially in level 1, this is our level 1 graph, the kids need double, triple the input to get even just a little bit of output. But traditionally what we were doing is we were doing the book exercises, and we would say, okay, turn to your partner and do this activity, and we would get so frustrated it would just fall apart. Well, the reality is they didn't have enough input in context to be able to use the language. So the students need tons and tons of input. Think of like a sponge and a pitcher of water, and if you pour that water into that sponge, the water gets absorbed, the largest portion of the water gets absorbed, but then just a little bit after a while starts to trickle out. That's how language acquisition works. They need tons and tons of input in order to just get a little bit of output. And so if we knew that our goals are focused on output, the kid's going to need a lot of input. So 55% of our daily learning targets are input. So the implication is the time that we give them time to stew and brew in the language before we ask them to use it, to write it, or to speak it. And what we're finding is we get better quality output. Kids still make mistakes. They're different mistakes than they were before. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you, throw that out there. To learn more about curriculum writing, I did want to share this resource with you. It's Donna Clementi and Laura Terrell's book. It is part of the Actful Keys series. There's now 4 Keys books, and they're all fantastic. So this one focuses on curriculum writing. There's a new one by Leslie Grahn about the strategies for learning that I cannot recommend enough. It's wonderful. I'm doing a book study with my folks this year on it. So I did want to show you, well, Christy, how has this affected your program? So remember, we tested the AAPPL before we switched our curriculum. And so we knew we were going to use the AAPPL as a measure. And so this is our measure. Now, this is a graph. I don't know if you're a graph person or not, but the takeaways that I want you to see from this, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these down were with new curriculum, meaning the light blue is when we gave the AAPPL on the textbook-based curriculum. The dark blue is when we tested again after having our level 1s gone through the proficiency-based curriculum that I just shared with you. So I just can't even, here's the part that excites me on this. So we have two kinds of courses in our district. So example, if you take Spanish 1, you have the option to take a standard or regular class. It has different names across the country, or standard or regular, or an honors course. Some of you call them advanced. It's just a distinction of expectations, exactly, so to speak. So I do want to point out that our level 1 down here at the bottom, you don't have to pay attention to the numbers. I can explain that in a minute, but just look at the graph itself. So looking at, in the large sample sizes, right? So it's not like it was just a classroom, it was a large sample size. So 1,500 of our standard or regular students took the AAPPL and scored here. Okay, let's just call it here on the graph. Well, moving up 2 spots, you're going to see the same group of honors students took the same AAPPL and scored this. But the year before, of our honors kids scored here, But take a look. So this is old curriculum, smarty pants kids, let's call them, whatever, honors kids, high performing kids. Scored that on the Apple in the old curriculum, but look at the standard or regular kids on the new curriculum. So our standard level 1 kids on the new curriculum outperform high performing honors students on the old curriculum. That blew us away. I mean, when do regular standard kids ever outperform honors kids? So this for us was one indication, yeah, we might be on the right track. So, so that was very, very, very exciting. So, and just so you know, this is how I've numerated. There's a little scale over here, the numerical equivalent. Because of the way the Apple scores, I had to have some kind of way to numerate it to make it a graph form, because we know principals, they love their graphs. So I had to kind of translate it to speak principal and administration and my bosses, and honestly with teachers as well, because in this day and age you can't get away with not talking data. In our struggle, to be honest, as a world language content area, we are not part of the core. We are not, math, science, social studies, and ELA. And so in our struggle to be part of the data conversation, this helps us a lot. So this was the way that I just took the below novice one, and you'll see this on the Apple score reports as BN1, N1, N2, so that if that's more familiar to you, I just make this scale and gave it a number. So this is what we use from now on to refer to our data. So that's where the numbers come from. But so if you're looking at this right here, our level 1 standard kids scored an N4, just above an N4, which is a novice high. Not bad, right? For 1 year. So we were pleased with that. Very pleased. So just to kind of put it, maybe you might be more familiar with this measure here. This is what is from the Apple site. So this is where our level 1 kids, novice high. So this is novice low, novice mid, novice high. Just to give you an idea. So they scored, our honors kids scored just hit intermediate low, which are our goals. So our goals for level 1 for our regular standard kids are novice high. It's pretty ambitious. It's pretty ambitious, but we're excited that the majority of our students are meeting that. So our goal for honors level 1 is intermediate low. I know, yeah, and they're doing it, so we're super thrilled. Our goal for our level 2 standard is intermediate low, and then our goal for level 2 honors is intermediate mid. Oh my gosh, I know, it's so very exciting. So we're pushing and pushing and pushing, but we're really excited. But we also know that when we get to that next level, it takes greater skill by the teacher, because intermediate mid is forever. So it's going to be an interesting year next year, getting our level 3 kids, still pushing them and pushing them. So one of the things that this is pulled straight from is AAPPL's performance descriptors for language learners, and we're really excited that our kids are exceeding this graph, because I would completely argue this is a true statement. Time is a critical component for developing language performance, most critical, I would even say, but I think it's also what you do with your time. You just can't have the apple as your end goal and then, wander your way through the year. You've got to have clear goals, backward designed from those goals. What am I going to clearly understand, teacher, me? What am I going to do tomorrow in the classroom? So that's. I'm hoping that one day we're the start of Apple having to redo this graph. So we'll see. Andrew, is now maybe a good time to pause? I'm almost done. Or do you want to keep going?
We can open it up for a few seconds. I don't see any hands raised or any questions typed in the box, but if anybody has any burning questions for now, please speak now or forever. Well, not forever, but for 10 more minutes, hold your peace.
I just need about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then I'll be ready to share and take questions.
Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead then.
Okay. All right, so just to let you know where we are as a district, remember, our way is not necessarily your way, but this is just where we are. We're in that level 3 pilot. We've implemented level 2. So this coming summer, we will write level 4, and next school year, we will implement level 3 district-wide. I will say we have hit the tipping point. Remember, I've got about 100 teachers. We've hit the tipping point, I would say, of buy-in. Remember, we've got veterans and brand new teachers and everything in between. So we've hit the tipping point for people to say, yes, I understand that teaching proficiency is how we're moving as a district, and I agree and want to do that. Where I find that our teachers are struggling is, what do I do? Um, and we've had some real honest conversations in our district about, okay, what does that kind of instruction look like? So we've got some model teachers, and we're working as a team to try to help each of the schools in turn. We've got 10 high schools and 10 middle schools. So I can't be everywhere, but that writing team that I told you about at the beginning are absolutely instrumental in helping their colleagues kind of get their brains around that. And they've got an open door policy, come in anytime. And so we've found enough student success to ignite and get people excited about the idea, but they're still struggling with how to create lesson plans. What does that look like? So that's where our work is going this summer for professional development. We're going to be working on, okay, so let's take this learning target and break it down, and here's what that lesson plan looks like. Here's the resources you're going to use. Now let's talk about what we do with them. So that's where we are. But I just encourage you that if you're trying to get your brain around proficiency and what it's all about, please know you don't have to understand everything to believe in something. You don't have to have a complete plan on paper. If you're a teacher in your classroom and you're thinking, gosh, I couldn't rewrite curriculum, I don't know if I can get money for the apple, just start with something. Just start. Maybe it's a book you pick up. Maybe you order one of those Keys books from Actful. Maybe it's a podcast you start listening to. Maybe it's, a blog you start following. So just don't feel like you have to have a total grasp of all the pieces before you take a step forward. I just encourage you, take that step forward, find a piece that you really are intrigued by and go after it. Follow that thread, and that thread will lead to the next and the next and the next. So I just encourage you to get started. So thank you for your time. I would love to hear what questions and comments that you have about anything I've said.
All right, thank you so much, Christy. We have a couple of questions here. I'll go ahead and read them to you.
Awesome.
First of all, we have, will we have access to this webinar? I would love to share with my middle school and high school language departments. I'll go ahead and answer that one.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. We are recording this webinar, as we are with our entire webinar series, and we will provide a link for you as soon as it ends, so that you can share with any of your colleagues or whoever you'd like.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing with your colleagues.
Yeah. Okay, and next one is for you, Christy. Can you tell us more about your new curriculum that helps students reach higher proficiency? What did you add to it?
I don't know about what we added, because this is where we started. So we literally scrapped everything. We didn't look at a textbook. So I just came back to this to show you. So this is our new, what you're looking at here. We started sitting in a room and staring at each other going, okay, what do kids want to talk about these days? And so we knew we wanted to make it around student interest. And so that has led us down some really fun paths for our topics. And so again, I'll be glad to share the links to our curriculum with you. I will make sure Andrew has those, and maybe that's part of the information that you can see. We will be releasing level 3 in just a few months, just a few weeks. So I have to still make it look pretty. But for us, it was a completely new approach to everything. So whereas a teacher before could sit down at her desk and open the textbook, the teacher edition, and go, okay, well, yesterday I finished at page 45, so that means today I need to go 46 to, whatever. And that was a really scary thing because there's a lot of security attached to that. So now when this is what we handed teachers, and well, what do I do with it? So that's what we found our work is to helping teachers understand the document, but also the vision, having them buy into what we're trying to do. And so I feel like we've hit the buy-in point, but it's just a matter of, okay, what do I do tomorrow? You know, so that's where we are, and that's where I find, to be honest, the teachers that are doing it well in the classrooms are the best advocates and helpers to those in the schools, because I just can't be everywhere with 20 schools. So I find them to be the most helpful. But yeah, our curriculum, we started over, and this is the results, just a snapshot of what you're seeing. So I encourage you to just explore different curricula around the country and see what appeals to you. Take the best from it and make your own. I will say this. We found the most valuable part of this was the following statement: he who works the most learns the most. So those teachers that walked through this process with us as a team absolutely learned the most. So that's why I encourage you not to just maybe even take our curriculum, though you're welcome to it. I would encourage you to get another teacher. If you're in the classroom, just get with another teacher and try to create some of these bits on your own. Maybe you start with trying to create a performance assessment, because the value comes from the trying to do the work. So that's why I say, and I have a word of caution where I've seen programs fail, is where they take somebody else's and try to make it their own, and it falls apart because there's no buy-in, there's no investment. It's just somebody at the top telling me something else to do. So I think there's great caution on our part by just taking something and use it. I think the most valuable part of the process was the learning that happened during the creation of the curriculum. I hope that answered the question. Probably more than I wanted.
Okay, we now have several more. So the
Okay.
next one, I would love to see the day-to-day plan for a unit to see how to start, carry it through, and complete a unit. Are you able to share the day-to-day for a unit?
As maybe day-to-day as like a lesson plan? Is that maybe what they're asking?
It appears that way, yes.
So we don't require our teachers to turn in lesson plans, but just to give you an idea about the day, so looking, for example, at this learning target 1 here, that is the day. So all of the activities would revolve around this one learning target. So all of our lessons would then lead to students being able to do this check for learning at the end of that day. And then so what I would do as a teacher is then, okay, looking at that piece, if that's my last activity, because this activity tells me if they can do this learning target, looking at this like last activity, what do I have to scaffold backwards to be able to get my kids to do that? So that's the thought process we're asking teachers to think through as they write their lesson plan.
Great, and I will add that as far as the end of year assessments go, once we start looking at the AAPPL to assess proficiency, something else that is available to the public on the actual website are the score descriptors. By no
Right.
means would I call those rubrics, but it does allow us to take a quick look at those can-do statements and how. Because all speaking samples and writing samples of the AAPPL are, of course, hand rated by AAPPL certified raters. So it allows us to take a brief glimpse into exactly what we are looking for at each proficiency level. Okay, next one for you, Christy. I am inspired by your work, and this is coming from the person asking the question, not just me. You already know that I'm inspired by it.
Well,
I'm
thank you so
inspired
much.
by your work. Love the idea of putting students' interests first for topics. Can you talk a bit about how daily lessons have changed? And did you use a particular lesson planning template to help teachers engage students in more listening and speaking?
Okay, so the first part of that, remind me one more again. How did I what? How did we what?
Let me go back up real quick.
Sorry.
Can you talk a bit about how daily lessons have changed?
Oh, yes. Kind of what I alluded to earlier. It's It's more about the teacher introducing a resource and helping the kids do something or several somethings, meaning activities with that resource. So it's not all coming from teacher talk. So what we found is that our kids actually are doing better with listening activities because it's not always the same voice. They're getting different accents and different voices from those different video or commercial or movie clip resources. So that we have found has actually improved their listening. So the other piece is kind of what I talked about earlier, is that we are seeing a higher motivation, because when kids talk about this performance assessment or any performance assessment, it's very personal. It's personalized for their real life. And so rather than talking about these contrived, imagine you are a foreign exchange student. What 14-year-old knows what it's like to be plopped down in Spain and live for 2 months? They don't know. So it's trying to create situations for them in those performance assessments that are real and that actually might happen. And let me tell you, that was hard as curriculum writers, but those are the essential pieces that we suppose that have created more of a buy-in in our students. We're just talking about things they like, and we're allowing them to tell us, hey, you know what? I really don't know where you hang out in the community. Tell me where you hang out. And so there is almost no other content area where kids get to have any input into what they're learning. And so they're really responding well to being asked, hey, what do you want to know? And we're finding that some of our teachers has made them a little bit uncomfortable because, gosh, they don't know the word for hoverboarding. And that's okay. They don't have to be the expert. We're not asking them to be the expert on the language pieces. We're saying it's okay, first of all, to say you don't know and say, oh my gosh, how do you know I don't know? I'm going to have to look that up. So let's learn together. What is hoverboarding or whatever it is? Hover something. I don't know. I don't know. What do you call that? Boogie boarding or whatever it is. Just whatever's of interest to the students. And so that has really taken this teacher off the stage, which I think is a good thing, and put the students more in the spotlight. The other side of that coin is, oh my gosh, it's up to the kid to perform. And if you want to get down to what is rigor, that fine line between challenging and frustrating a student, you talk about taking on the responsibility of learning. My mantra this year has been, let's make sure kids are working as hard as the teachers are. That's been my mantra, and I think that's finally happening in some of our places. The kids are, gosh, I have to pay attention now as a kid, because oh my goodness, we're gonna have to talk about this in 2 weeks, right? So there's a little bit more of a, I got to pay attention to this activity we're doing today because I know it's going to matter when I have to talk to my teacher one-on-one in 3 weeks or whatever.
Okay, next question. What's the biggest difference between Apple 2.0, which was just released this March, and Apple 1.0? Krista, you and I can kind of split this one.
Sure.
So we'll start with you. What were the main differences that you saw testing this year as opposed to years past?
Most importantly, it was more, I think, platform change than maybe so much content change from what I've observed. And Andrew, you might speak differently to that. But for us, we were testing this year, we had over 8,500 Apple tests that we gave. And we could not have done that on the old platform, meaning the interface and the navigation. I asked, and Jamie from LTI was very nice to explain it to me because I don't understand technology often, but he said it was because they switched to an HTML5. I didn't know, but I told that to my IT people here who I work closely with for the testing window, and they said, oh yeah, that's a good thing. So yay. So Andrew, I don't know what else there is to that, but for me, it was a huge improvement as far as smooth testing experience for our schools.
Yeah, Krista, you nailed it. That's the one main difference is, so this used to be a Flash-based assessment, which would require a few additional hoops to jump through. Those of you who are familiar with Flash, it's kind of old technology. You have to download Flash Player, this and that. So it was a big deal for us to switch over to HTML5 this year. So that enables us to, I mean, it just looks different, as Christy mentioned. It appears to be an assessment that is from 2019 as opposed to 1998.
Yes.
But in addition to that, it opens up the possibility of administering this assessment on any desktop, laptop computer, including Chromebooks, as well as tablets. And that's a big deal for a lot of schools and districts who may or may not have a one-to-one type situation and use different kinds of devices. Another feature to Apple 2.0 is the WCAG and ADA 2.0 compliance. We have a full arsenal, which Christy, you may have noticed. We have a full arsenal of accommodation features. Some of them are available to all students, so anyone who takes the assessment. Others are opened up as soon as we receive a request that includes, student A has an IEP, student B has a 504 plan. So this includes color adjustments, increasing font size, being able to zoom in on images, subtitling for videos and audio, so on and so forth. Any accommodation we can meet at this point.
And then I think the one that impacted our district the most was extended time on the speaking portion. That allowed our students to really be able to calm, those that struggle in that area, particularly during testing situations. So we found that to be probably our most used accommodation.
Great. But aside from that, so technology-wise, obviously huge upgrades there, but it is still the Apple, right? It is still that 4-skill assessment. It still covers all modes of communication. So as far as the content goes, ACTFL refreshes the content every single year, no matter what. So that still happened. But as far as the content goes, as far as administering this assessment year after year, it is still on the ACTFL proficiency scale. Those ratings still mean the same thing. Next question, how often do you give Apple per unit? Also, is there any way to have today's slideshow? We already answered that second one, but the first one?
So we give the Apple once a year. We just do the Apple, tends to be in April. We are actually the kickoff to the testing season. So we test just before our Tennessee state assessments happen. So kind of gets us in testing mode. We're actually excited to get them before they're a little bit testing fatigued. So that's a good piece. But just to clear up the question, so we have 4 units in our curriculum, and each of those units has 2 or 3 Apple-like assessments, meaning these performance assessments that you see on the screen. So over the course of the year, a student has probably participated in about 10 Apple-like assessments. And we do test, remember the output is where we're kind of doing our summative. So let's call it a handful of interpersonal and a handful of writing, presentational writing pieces. So created to be Apple-like in order to prepare them for the Apple at the end of the course.
Great. And to go quickly back to the question about Apple 2.0, what I've done in the chat box, you may have noticed, is I posted a link to what is called Apple Central. So by following this link, you can take a look at, there's an Apple 2.0 document that lays out all of those new details. There are demo links. There are links to those ACTFL resources that I mentioned, the score description, so on and so forth. Next question, why do we only have 2 demo questions for the speaking demo test? I will go ahead and take that one. So the demos are available. They are public domain, and they are available for several different languages across all 4 skills. And the way that we do that is we take sample content from years past. And the reason for posting these demos is not to show the entire testing experience. For the interpersonal listening and speaking section, there are 18 different prompts, back and forth, as Christy can attest to. For the demo, yes, there are 2. And the reason for these demos is to get students comfortable with the platform, get them comfortable with putting on those headphones, having a quick conversation with the heritage speaker on the screen, and just getting used to the idea of taking an online proficiency assessment. Christy, have you used the demos with your students at all?
Oh, yes. I encourage my students, my teachers to have their students do those demos even several times, because what we never want is the testing environment, platform, specialness to interfere with a student's testing ability to deliver what is being asked on the test. So we try to keep our teachers uh, we encourage them to have them use that demo, because we find we don't want the first time that they experience, oh my gosh, my mic doesn't work, to be on test day. So we want them to work through all those issues. Sometimes it's a matter of the device that that particular teacher is using is not going to work as well as something else. So absolutely 100% across the board encourage our teachers. In fact, another way that we encourage our teachers throughout the year, not just say, practice the demo, but create an environment that kind of ups the ante a little bit for our students, so you can kind of simulate the testing environment. And one of the many ways that my teachers do that, for example, is they will have the kids record their interpersonal conversation and then upload it to Google Classroom. And so it creates another, not just the teacher walking around, but it's being recorded. Now, secret is the teacher may or may not listen to that, but they can grade it if they choose, but maybe they just want the kids to practice what it feels like to be recorded. So just some ideas that we use throughout the year to get the kids prepared to perform.
Great. And it looks like one final question. Looks like this is a question for me. Does one have to be trained to be a test administrator? Is there a way to learn more about what is on the apple? And I lied, that is not the last one. So I'll go ahead and answer that very quickly. Does one have to be trained to be a test administrator? No. So what we do is we provide Apple proctoring guidelines. We also provide on a daily basis Apple account walkthroughs. So not only looking at the client site, how to order these assessments at the district level, how do we get teachers ordering assessments, so on and so forth, sorting ratings, looking at the reporting as Christy has shown today. And as far as learning more about what is on the Apple, again, we are happy to set up a WebEx, a one-on-one WebEx, in order to give a walkthrough. We have screenshots. We're happy to go through demos. We're happy to provide all the resources you need to learn everything that you would like about this assessment. Okay, and one more question. Looks like, hi, Andrew. There is also the Apple Communication Builder that allows you to create similar prompts for students to practice. Okay, so it looks like that was more of a comment than a question.
Sure.
But yeah, so Christy, are you familiar with the Apple Communication Builder?
We have not, so that is something I'm hoping to dive into later. We found that it was problematic before the change to HTML, so it was sometimes more frustrating than not, but we're hoping to dig into that. And I will say one thing I'm excited about exploring kind of on the admin side of as the test administrator, there are some more reporting features that are in Apple. So I know y'all saw my graph that I had to make, and so I've been excited that the company has also invested in increasing their features in the reporting site. So I might not have to do so much wizardry in Excel. So that would be great. So I'll explore those this summer.
Great. And I will add that, yes, the ACTFL did just recently upgrade the Communication Builder as the Apple went through an upgrade earlier in the spring. So that is now on HTML5, and it is a wonderful resource. It is available through the ACTFL site. It is a wonderful resource to get students practicing with that interpersonal mode. Okay, looks like another one. Can we, as teachers, take a complete Apple assessment? Christy, have you taken a complete Apple assessment yourself?
No, I haven't, but I have had some teacher interest in that, and I thought, yes, I would love to write that check to let those teachers experience it for themselves. So that's something we're thinking about, maybe developing a professional development session around giving and actually taking that assessment. And then, of course, when we get our score results coming back together and talking about it. So I don't know, to be determined. So we'll see. I love that idea. I encourage you to do that. I think that's a great place to start. Maybe you start with your you and a buddy or your department and take the apple. I think that's a great idea.
It is, and we do see that happen quite often. Teachers, administrators want to experience it for themselves so that they can better prepare their students. They can tell them, more or less what they will be experiencing. There are other resources. There are the Apple Tips videos, which you'll see on Apple Central, they're actually kids saying, hey, you are going to take this assessment that is, like no other thing you've done before. You can do this, this, and this to better your score, so on and so forth. Let's see. Looks like that was the last question. But as far as taking it yourselves, yes, again, that is done quite often. And what can be done is, not only taking it yourselves, but we are I should say AAPPL is constantly looking for new AAPPL certified raters for the Apple. It is a training that happens once per year. So if you are in a situation like Christy's, where you are constantly in touch with teachers, with other administrators, world language educators in general, it's a wonderful opportunity to not only get to know the ins and outs of the assessment, but to listen to these speaking samples, to read through the writing samples, to be trained on exactly what is the difference between intermediate low and intermediate mid. What are we looking for? And that is something that can also be found on the AAPPL website. Is the individual to contact. I will go ahead and post that in the chat box as well. And it looks like Christy is one step ahead of me with her contact information. So if you have any additional questions for her, please feel free to get in touch. Is that correct, Christy?
Yes, I invite it.
Any time of the day, right? All throughout the weekend?
Well, you can write me, but I'll probably come back to you on Monday morning.
That's fair.
But yeah, I'd love hearing from educators. At the end of the day, when I've helped somebody else understand and walk another step on their path to proficiency, I am thrilled to pieces. So that's my email there, christina.gilliland@wcs.edu. The next is my Twitter. I welcome you to join me on Twitter. I love having dialogues on Twitter. That's where I often post resources or different things our schools are doing. So if you are intrigued by our district's journey, our language team, the curriculum writing team I told you about earlier, were interviewed on We Teach Languages. That is a podcast that I completely recommend. It is wonderful. It's all about language education and pedagogy and practice and everything in between. So we were actually featured in, we talked so long, to be honest, in 2 episodes there. So that is a link. These are all links. I don't know if you'll be able to access them once it's become shareable the way Andrew's going to share it, but if you just Google We Teach Languages and look at episodes 66 to 67, it's several hours of us going into detail, and you actually hear from the teachers themselves, which I think is the best part.
Great.
Anything else?
Thank you so much, Christy. I will go ahead and post again in the chat box my email. So if you have any questions for me about the nerdy details about the assessment, not the fun details, those are for Christy, but the nerdy details, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for attending, and even more thanks for your wonderful questions. We look forward to continuing this LTI webinar series to cover Apple, cover other AAPPL assessments that we're so proud to offer. And once again, thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you.